The morning was tense at the International Global Governance Conference in Paris. Leaders from around the world gathered to discuss the challenges their nations faced and to propose solutions for cooperation. Among them was Ibrahim Traoré, the young president of Burkina Faso, who had caught global attention for his firm stance against neocolonialism and his advocacy for African autonomy. As the question and answer session began, Jean-Marc Dubois, a prominent French journalist known for his liberal views and frequent criticism of the Burkinabe government, took the microphone. Dubois was infamous for his provocative style, often using these opportunities to aggressively question leaders whom he considered populist. President Traoré. Dubois began with a mocking smile. "Many here admire your fiery speeches on independence and dignity, but please tell us, how can a country like Burkina Faso, still dependent on foreign aid for basic needs, claim it is heading toward autonomy?" The room fell silent, awaiting Traoré's response. Some in the audience expected Traoré to become angry or defensive, but the president remained calm, offering a light smile. "Thank you for your question, Mr. Dubois," Traoré replied, adjusting his microphone. "But before I answer, I'd like to ask you a question." Dubois was taken aback, but nodded in agreement. "Do you believe France would be where it is today if it had not extracted resources from its colonies for centuries? And more importantly, would the world listen to your critiques if France were in the same position as Burkina Faso is now?" The room was struck by silence. The audience seemed stunned by Traoré's direct and sharp reply. Dubois hesitated for a few moments before attempting to rebut. "Sir, we're talking about the present, not the past. But the present is shaped by the past." Traoré interrupted, his voice commanding. "If you want to understand why Burkina Faso is where it is today, we must look at decades of exploitation during the colonial and post-colonial periods, which drained our resources and stunted our development." He paused, emphasizing his message before continuing. "As for our autonomy, let me be clear. Yes, we still face difficulties, but we are building something many developed nations have long since lost: the ability to dream of a better future and to act together to make it a reality. We're not asking for charity. We are carving our own path." The room erupted in applause, while Dubois stood silent, visibly embarrassed. He tried to ask another question, but his colleagues interrupted, suggesting it was time to give others a chance. Traoré smiled, knowing he had not only answered the journalist, but had also delivered a powerful message to the world. In that moment, the young president of Burkina Faso had made a statement not just to a French journalist, but to the international community as a whole. His words resonated, reflecting a broader call for African nations to step into their own power and take charge of their future without the constraints of past exploitation. After President Traoré's pointed rhetorical question, Jean-Marc Dubois seemed taken aback. He tried to regain his composure, but the weight of Traoré's words had struck a chord with many in the room. Whispers spread through the audience, acknowledging the depth of the Burkinabe leader's response. Seeing this as the perfect opportunity, Traoré continued to fortify his stance with a historical lesson that would further challenge Dubois's perception. "Mr. Dubois," he began, his tone calm but unwavering, "do you know how many tons of gold were extracted from Burkina Faso during the colonial period? How many of our natural resources were taken without the consent of our people? These riches didn't just build empires, they left deep scars on our land and our people." A moment of deliberate silence followed, as the room absorbed the gravity of his words. Traoré paused, allowing the impact of his message to settle before delivering his conclusion with a firm, resolute voice. "Yet more than half a century later, we are still working tirelessly to rebuild what was lost. We do not complain, nor do we apologize. We are building our future with our own hands, and that is what developed nations should admire. Not belittle. The room fell into a deep, respectful silence, with many in the audience visibly moved by the weight of Traoré's response. Some delegates discreetly clapped, while others nodded in agreement, recognizing the strength of his words. Meanwhile, Dubois appeared lost in thought. He knew that any counter-argument at this moment would seem feeble in the face of Traoré's sharp logic. After a few moments of hesitation, Dubois stammered, "Mr. President, I understand your point, but there is still much to be done." Traoré smiled serenely, as though he had anticipated Dubois's response. "Of course, Mr. Dubois, there will always be work to do. But the important thing is that we are doing this work with dignity and determination. We are not waiting for anyone to come and rescue us. We are rescuing ourselves." The hall was utterly silent. Even the most outspoken critics of Traoré could not deny the power of his words. Dubois, visibly moved, lowered his head and quietly returned to his seat, unable to add anything further. In the days that followed, the dialogue between Traoré and Dubois exploded on social media. The video of the exchange spread rapidly, garnering widespread acclaim for the president's eloquence and intellectual depth. Hashtags such as #RespectForAfrica and #TraoréClaps back trended, sparking a deep discussion about prejudice and the condescending attitudes towards African nations. For Traoré, this was not just a personal victory. It was an opportunity to reshape how the world perceives Africa. In a later interview, he shared, "Criticism is essential when it is constructive, but when it stems from prejudice and ignorance, we must respond with truth and dignity. That is how we change minds." Traoré's response had transcended the immediate exchange. It had become a defining moment in global discourse, challenging not only the views of an individual journalist, but also the broader, often paternalistic mindset that has historically shaped relations between Africa and the rest of the world. His words reverberated across the globe, sending a message that African nations are no longer passive recipients of aid or charity, but active participants in shaping their future. The day he confronted Dubois was more than just a political encounter. It was a bold declaration of Africa's independence, resilience, and right to self-determination on the world stage. This exchange between Traoré and Dubois had far-reaching implications, not only for Burkina Faso, but for the entire African continent. It was a moment that forced the world to reassess the way it engages with Africa, no longer as a helpless subject of international politics, but as a rising force with its own narrative aspirations and dignity. Following his sharp retort to Jean-Marc Dubois, President Ibrahim Traoré's response did not just shake the room in Paris. It became a focal point of global media attention. His unwavering insistence on revisiting the colonial past of Burkina Faso and the country's ongoing path toward autonomy struck a chord with millions around the world. Within days, the video of the debate had been shared millions of times. Social media was flooded with comments like, "Traoré is the voice Africa needs," and "Finally, someone dares to confront prejudice." Activists, scholars, and even politicians began quoting Traoré's speech as a model example of how to address historical and contemporary issues with intellect and dignity. On his part, Dubois, who had initially sought to challenge Traoré, decided to write a public article acknowledging that he had underestimated both the president and Burkina Faso. "I was arrogant," he confessed in the opening of his piece. But President Traoré taught me a valuable lesson: never underestimate the strength of a nation that is fighting for its dignity. In his article, Dubois analyzed how he had failed to grasp the complex challenges facing Africa and had overlooked the enduring effects of colonialism. He concluded the piece with a public apology to Traoré and the people of Burkina Faso, promising to use his platform to amplify the voices of the marginalized. For President Traoré, the encounter with Dubois was not just a personal triumph, it was an opportunity to send a message from Burkina Faso to the world. At a press conference in Ouagadougou, Traoré shared his thoughts with reporters. What happened in Paris was not my victory alone. It was the voice of an entire nation that is tired of being defined by others. Journalists scribbled furiously as he continued. Burkina Faso does not need pity. We only ask for respect and an equal opportunity to build our future. In France, Dubois' article sparked an intense wave of debate. Many of his colleagues were shocked by his rare self-criticism, while some conservative voices accused him of being swayed by emotional arguments. However, young readers particularly were enthusiastic in their support. The article quickly became one of the most read pieces that week, with social media platforms and news outlets buzzing with discussions about the shift in Dubois' perspective. Traoré's response and Dubois' subsequent reflection had a profound impact beyond the confines of the debate. It wasn't just about a journalist's challenge. It was about reasserting Africa's agency on the global stage. Traoré had not only defeated a critic, he had forced the world to confront its outdated assumptions about Africa's role in the international community. The debate opened the door to a broader conversation about how Africa is perceived and how it is allowed to shape its own future. In a world where African voices are often marginalized or ignored, Traoré's stance was a reminder that the continent's narrative is no longer defined by the legacy of colonization or external imposition. Instead, it is defined by leaders like Traoré, who are determined to pave the way forward for their poor countries on their own territory. For President Traoré, this exchange marked a turning point. It was not simply a victory in one battle, but a message to the world. Africa is ready to stand on its own, and its leaders will no longer tolerate being silenced or patronized. As the debate continued to echo around the world, the legacy of this moment became clear. It was the beginning of a new narrative for Africa, one where the continent asserts its autonomy and demands to be heard. In the aftermath of this exchange, the conversation surrounding the future of Africa, its sovereignty, and its place in the global order would never be the same. The power of Traoré's words had sparked a transformation, and the world would now have to reckon with the reality of a changing Africa, one that no longer asks for permission, but demands respect and an equal seat at the table of global discourse.